we start to look to uncover any opportunity where there could be a discussable moment. And a lot of times businesses don't have time to spend kind of putting that puzzle together, right? Because every one of these conversations, although very alike, are like puzzles, and they're different every time, but still the puzzle will come together. And that's what makes it fun too, by the way.
Hello there, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Orthopreneurs podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Glenn Krieger, and here today is a very special guest who I think you're going to really appreciate, but only if you enjoy saving money, lots of it, and things that you're already doing. I'll guarantee you this guy can save you tons of money. That's your WIFM, everybody. That's what's in it for you. So please, let's welcome Darren Morris, strategic partner from Schooley Mitchell. Welcome, Darren.
Thank you, Glenn. Great to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. And again, for anybody listening, he's going to talk, and we're going to talk a great deal about how Schooley Mitchell can actually help you save huge amounts of money. And we're going to talk about what kind of money. We're not talking 50 or $100. We're talking 5 figures, 6 figures worth of money per year. And so, and not, you don't have to do anything different than what you're already doing, right? You don't have to change your operational procedures in any way, right?
That's exactly right. 80% of the time, there's no vendor or carrier changes.
Isn't that a beautiful thing, people? And so if you heard me say it properly, you're going to save a ton of money with almost mostly, there's a good one right there, right? Mostly, with predominantly not having to change anybody who you're ordering from. And so before we get there, Darren, I know your bio, I know your background, but if you don't mind taking a little bit of time and just letting everybody know who you are and how you ended up where you are today.
So Darren Morris, Schooley Mitchell, grew up in Chicago. After college, I was an English major, decided to pack my car and move to San Diego, where I joined the Mac Tools division of Stanley Black & Decker. And the fastest way to grow was to produce results and to move. Consequently, I moved 8 times and landed in Kansas City, Missouri, where throughout that time, increasing responsibility, where I've negotiated with significant players in different markets. But in 2018, our company was sold twice in 100 days. I helped do that. And I made a decision to embark on a new opportunity to take what I've learned and do something different and help organizations at the same time becoming a small business myself. So it was a really great experience to transition from a corporate executive to suddenly I kind of had an opportunity to affect things in much more diverse areas. So in 19, I started working in the consulting field where we help organizations across all facets, look at inefficiencies and find areas where there's a nickel laying out there, and we try to gather up all those nickels.
The key to what you do is negotiating purchasing on behalf of people, right? At its core, you're not I want to be crystal clear so people understand. You are not suggesting to people to buy something different. You're not asking them to say, hey, I know you like Coke, but I'm asking you to buy Pepsi, right? You're not saying, hey, by the way, I know you like to buy Coca-Cola, but I'm going to get you Coca-Cola, but it's not U.S. Coca-Cola, it's South American Coca-Cola, right? We're not talking about gray market goods. We're talking about literally, if you like that can of Coke that you have in your refrigerator, we're going to get you that can of Coke. We're just going to get it for you at a significant discount, right?
That's right. In fact, vendors, let's face it, vendors are the core part of every business. And both the types of vendors, supplies they offer, services they have, they're very important. And those relationships are important. So maintaining and honoring that relationship is really at the core of what we do. We act as extensions of practices or businesses that we support in a way that we attempt to ask the right questions and look outside the box in a variety of ways, fundamentally trying to get to a place where people are paying only for what they're supposed to be paying for, not extra stuff, not over provisioning. And that's important because vendors have to make money. So although it would appear that the lowest common denominator, the lowest price is always the goal, actually, the right service at the right price is the goal. So, we know pricing's elastic. And what we look for is our clients to have the right side of that elasticity, not the high end.
Before elasticity, what was the word?
The right side of that elastic band, right? So as you think about pricing, there's multiple varieties of pricing, whether it be large national account buying, cooperative buying opportunities. In the government side, there's contracts. And then there's the rest of us who buy retail or off the shelf or one-on-one. Well, there's multiple ways to buy. Vendors are profitable, but we're trying to get the right price for the right service,
Right on.
and to ensure that it's not overdone.
So, what are some examples? You've been in healthcare, right? You've helped other healthcare providers before. What are a couple of examples of things before we get into the how, which is really cool, how you do this? What are some examples of things like people listening right now go, I have no idea what this guy's talking about. Is he
Right,
talking about
right.
me buying like a $100,000 CBCT machine, or is he talking about me
Right,
buying
right.
Bounty, paper towels?
And Bounty paper towels would be a more interesting conversation, because how many paper towels does one need, or how many do they use, and where do they get them from? A lot of people have them. One fun area. So really, if you think about a P&L, the indirect side or the non-core outside of those large machines, things you have to have, but all of the stuff a business needs to run, from telecommunications to, let me stop on waste. We did a project in Kansas City on porta potties of all things, and told somebody that when I introduced myself, I said I'm the king of turds of Kansas City, because we do the dirty work.
The king of That's
Well,
great.
I said that because, and I mentioned waste. So even though at times medical waste may not be the largest spend, it's one of the most unique contracting vendors. So whether it be solid, recycling, or medical waste, all of the waste contracts are still old school, hardcore, auto renewals, things of that nature. So we look at not just the spend, that's the report card, but the contract terms are important too. Do you have price increase notations? Can we cap those? What about auto renewals? Can you move? Do you have choices, or is that vendor, servicing you in a way that their commitment meets the contract? So it's really across the board, and we find on average just under 30% on waste across all boundaries.
Right. Now, you said 30% across all things. So it's not just medical waste, because let's be honest, in orthodontics, medical waste is a small, but I think the point you're making here is, let's look at your profit and loss. Let's look across the line items and see where you're spending. Now, obviously, if you're working, you say, look, my marketing budget is too high and it's all labor costs related to marketing, not a whole lot I suspect you can do to help people there. But when it comes to material goods, right,
Right.
you can move the needle. Well, again, you're not going to buy, unless you're using $100,000 a year in Bounty paper towels, which I'd be willing to wager you could probably get a discount for people if you could. It sounds to me that anything on the line item where you can really move a needle and make a significant difference is someplace where you could step in, right?
That's right. And there's so many types of vendors. Thinking of in the supply side of the world, there's a myriad variety of those. Additionally, and the folks who do uniforms or mats, like the Cintas's, the Aramarks, all those, even though sometimes spends may seem nominal, start adding it up and it becomes pretty meaningful.
So my question for you is this. We're talking about getting vacations, not dinners, meaning you probably just, if in your line item you can save enough money to take me and my wife on a vacation, it's probably worth looking at. If you're talking about me and my wife can go get a dinner out of the money we save, probably not worth talking about, right?
Exactly. So using that analogy, let's take kind of one step further, a little deeper, and talk about supplies. Right? There's some market leaders in the supply category, and one of the unique features of those folks is that they have great service, salespeople at every location. But by looking at a P&L, you can make a fairly reasonable determination based on spend, right? Based revenue versus spend of a category, and identify, for example, a $2 million couple location practice who's spending, say, 8 to 9% on supplies, most likely has $40 to $60,000 of overspend, or ways to probably identify. And that's just in all the little stuff that they're buying for that practice, which is, at least in my case, plenty to go on vacation
Yeah.
or couple vacations.
Yeah, exactly. When we talk about it, give me an example of something that an orthodontist, right? Medical waste isn't going to hit home for me. But Are you able to do this, say, with orthodontic bracket manufacturers?
So across the landscape, anybody, especially when there's a competitive set. Now, as you know, people have preference for certain manufacturers, but the answer is yes. We can do this across any type of supply manufacturer. I think it's important, though, it's always dependent upon the circumstance, but also what the orthodontist is using. Because in some cases, they have a preference, or there's very something specific that they've used. So, given the context, opportunities lie in variety and location. Sometimes other vendors are interested in getting business, whereas some vendors are looking at keeping it. And we try to find the nuance and the opportunity in there.
So I know before we go on to the podcast, we sit and we chat. I learn a little bit more. I dive in with a few questions. Here's something I didn't ask you ahead of time, and I apologize, but it's just coming to mind here. Most orthodontists, for brackets in particular, right? I'm just using that as one example. With brackets in particular, they order from usually either directly from the manufacturer themselves through the representative of the manufacturer. I'm going to make up a company here. I'm going to call it Glenn's Orthodontic Brackets. So most orthodontists are either going to call Glenn's Brackets directly if there's a direct line and order from them and hope there's some specials. But most are going to order through Glenn's representative, Darren. Darren stops in the office from time to time, and they contact Darren when they need to place an order for $10,000 worth of brackets. Darren places the order because he works for Glenn's Orthodontic Brackets, and the brackets ship. Are you able to move the needle in those sorts of relationships?
Matter of fact, it's Darren in that case that we would be speaking to, because while we look at a variety of other outside influences, we're working directly with the people that are in the offices. So the answer, most of the time, right? There's always opportunities where we can't. And when we cannot find savings, we typically, it'll be a verified report that says you're optimized or you're exactly where you should be. See, Glenn, we know what everybody's paying, right? We know what everybody across the United States spends, and different marketplaces have different prices. So sometimes information really helps guide what people can and can't do. Or there are times when that Darren, in this case, was a really, really good friend. He's done great work, and we want to honor that. But we just want to ask a few questions to make sure that there's the attentiveness to the profitability of the practice as opposed to the manufacturer.
Right on. And so here comes the question, right? Because let's just say I'm John Q, average orthodontist, who's sitting across from Darren. He's making his pitch. Hey, Glenn, we're going to save you a ton of money. We're going to save it across a bunch of platforms. We're going to save you and everything. We're going to go to your reps. My first question, you know what's coming, right?
Oh, yeah.
What's my first question, Darren?
Yeah. How much does it cost?
Yeah. And, well, that's for me, honestly, that's the second question. The first question is, how are you able to do this?
Absolutely. Well, a couple things, and I get that a lot, especially with the concept of, hey, I've got someone who does this, or we've got people who do this. The first, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, we talk to these vendors every day, all day, and that's all we do. We're specialists in this particular field. So we know what everybody's paying. Second, we know questions to ask. In many cases, if you think about it, it's just about asking the right question at the right time. And then the data. Data tells us everything, right? So we look at contracts, we make sure there's compliance to the agreement. Have there been increases? Why? Are those increases spread across? We start to look to uncover any opportunity where there could be a discussable moment. And a lot of times, businesses don't have time to spend kind of putting that puzzle together, right? Because every one of these conversations, although very alike, are like puzzles, and they're different. They're different every time, but still the puzzle will come together, and that's what makes it fun too. By the way,
Right. Oh, I suspect it's problem solving, right?
that's
And
right.
you're a golfer, you're a fly fisherman. You like solving little problems one step at a time, right? Using
That's
an
exactly
artistic
right.
approach, using your words, not mine, right?
Ha, that's right.
But for I'm going to steal some of your thunder here a little bit, if you don't mind,
No.
because I'm an advocate for what you're proposing. And you told the story about the Jefferson Memorial, right?
Oh
Because
yes, yes.
you used it to make an illustration. Because there's a number of different ways. I'm going to even step it back further, because every time I want to say it, I see the bigger picture. And the biggest picture here is whenever there's a negotiation, between two parties for any form of transaction, there's leverage. And that leverage is either held by you or it's held by the other party. It's rare where leverage is equal, right?
That's right.
If I want to date you and you want to date me, great, we have equal leverage, right? I want to date you, you want to date me, right? As opposed to me begging you for a date and you're not really that interested, right? You have all the leverage. And
That's right.
so in business, generally speaking, people don't realize this, but the consumer has the leverage because they always assume it's a take it or leave it position. And most of the time, it's not, it is a take it or leave it in the end, but it's not binary. It's multiple levels because, I have many factors that could influence that leverage, right? So one of them that, if you want to talk about it real quickly, is the ability to buy in numbers, correct?
That's right. So not only numbers, but it's knowledge, right? So you talked about having the basis for information. So leverage is about knowing. We've got over 35,000 clients, and we know what they all spent. So two things happen. It's not just about the negotiating for one moment, but there are also, when we do look at other vendors, and we do not represent vendors, we're not brokers. So when you talk about leverage and numbers, we bring opportunities to vendors. So vendors typically want to work with us, even though it would seem on the face that when we call, they realize that we're looking at potentially minimizing their margin and maximizing profitability for an entity. But at the same time, we're also bringing them opportunities because when they're not supporting said client, they have the opportunity to quote that. And so there are opportunities to change vendors should that be an interest to a client.
So it really comes down to the idea that they want to sell a product, and if they want to make X amount of dollars on it, ideally, but
That's right.
maybe, just maybe, if they can make Y or Z, it makes it worthwhile for them to sell it. And as long as they're making a profit, most companies would say, I'd rather sell it and move it and make a profit than to stick to my guns and stick with the price that I was charging Dr. Smith, right?
That's right. And not only that, but things change, right? Products change, cost of goods change, their manufacturing processes change, and everybody who's making something is always themselves trying to work on cost out opportunities, but they don't always pass those along. So there's a variety of mechanisms, to your point, that we try to find.
And the other aspect of it, I love the way I'll get to the Lincoln Memorial or Jefferson Memorial in a little bit,
Yeah,
but I loved your analogy about how you negotiate with your wife, with your daughter, and your wife. Those
yeah.
two ways you explained to me about how you negotiate with your daughter and how you negotiate with your wife. Do you want to share those two? Because I laughed out loud.
Negotiating is about transparency and about integrity. And you could call it sales or persuasion. There's a lot of different languages or flavors for it. But at the heart of negotiating, if I could impart something, it'd be you want 10% more. It's not about 50-50. It's not about splitting. It's not about winning all the time, but it's about getting a little bit more all the time. And I was telling you the story. My daughter threatened to hold her breath until she got ice cream. Well, she passed out because I don't negotiate with terrorists. So there's moments, right?
Right. I used to say that about my kids, by the way. I show my kids, and I say to my wife, we don't negotiate with terrorists.
That's well, on my wife's side of the equation, we sometimes have to be quiet because we try to read each other's words. So we sit at a table, and she slid a paper over to me one time, and I looked under it, and I wrote a number down. I slid it back. We were negotiating a thermostat temperature.
I love that. There's a great commercial that was on television. I think it didn't get as much play as it should have. And I can't even tell you what company it was for, but everybody listening should take note because it showed a little kid and it said from the time he was a little boy, I'll use your name, Darren Morris, learned the value of asking for more. And it was
That's
a little
right.
boy who was holding out an ice cream cone, I think it was. And the guy hands him the ice cream cone. And it's just like a vanilla cone. And he just looks at the guy and says, and? That's all he said,
That's right.
and the guy goes, takes the cone back, goes, and some sprinkles too, right? The guy he didn't even say, I want sprinkles. He just looked at me and says, and? And so then it shows him going through life, and every time he has a situation, and he goes, and he always gets more simply
It's a
by
beautiful
asking
question.
and the funniest part is he's on a date, and I think the girl gives him a kiss on the cheek or something, and he goes, and
And
you know, but it was a brilliant commercial in that you get zero of what you don't ask for, and the overwhelming majority, and I'm sorry, folks listening, I know you're going to hammer me for this, and maybe you really shouldn't. Orthodontists, who are very smart people, very smart people. I mean, they graduated top of their classes, and to get to where they got as orthodontists required significant sacrifice and mental acuity. But they also fancy themselves experts in many areas where they're not. There's a bit of Dunning-Kruger syndrome going on here. And if you say, did you negotiate? Oh, I'm a great negotiator, right? I negotiate, right? And it's like that question when they poll drivers, 90% or 80% said they're above average drivers. How can 80% of people polled be above average? It's obviously they miscalculate their driving skills. I don't think they realize what it's like to sit across from a real negotiator, right? There are people I know who are professional poker players. I'm not talking they play on the weekends and win some money, but they're legitimate. I knew two young men, brothers, who played on the professional poker tour. They traveled the country. They played in Vegas. They were on TV numerous times. When you negotiate with someone like that, who really understands human psyche, it's a different ballgame.
it is indeed. And there's kind of two elements. People who have patience and time, and we don't have a lot of that, right? Orthodontists are busy. Companies and owners are busy. Time is typically on the side of the person who wins, and the second part is the ability to ask a lot of questions. So many times if you're involved personally, there's also emotion because you want to win. We all many people have competed in something, and over time, however, you end up being a kind of the mental memory scars. In golf, if you think about a swing, sometimes for anybody who golfs, you look at children who golf, and all of a sudden they're hitting the ball, start hitting it pretty far. Well, how is it that these little bitty kids can manifest that swing? Well, when you started golfing and somewhere along the way you had a bad shot, well, that scarred you and it becomes memorable, and you kind of shy away from that. You forget to ask, you forget to go back to it, and you start using your arms instead of your hips. And kids don't know any better. Well,
No.
they have to do what they have to do to make that ball go. So same thing goes in conversations. You have a good one with a vendor, you have a bad one with a vendor. Or in any case, you ever negotiate for a car? Listen, and we can say
They
what you
own
want.
you, by the way. If you think you can personally negotiate for a car and beat them, I don't care what you got. You walked out thinking you won. You didn't. I promise you.
I got a very quick story. My
Sure.
wife, my wife had we had a minivan. It was a Honda minivan she had when my children are now 15 and 18. We go on an annual camping trip, and you want to talk about negotiating? She told me, and I would never. She's just going to walk into the dealership and buy the first car she sees. So she says to me, Darren, I want a new car, and I held out as long as I could. I was trying to get the money together, and I was holding out. Well, we're going on a camping trip, and she posts to everybody, and we called it the Blue Beast final trip. Darren promised to get me a car, and I didn't. Well, you talk about negotiating. Who was I going to argue with? There was nobody to argue with. I was on the clock.
Yeah.
And she got a new car.
Yeah.
And so there's all kinds of ways to create imagery and fun. And by the way, getting that new car, I hired a consultant, because when I'm in that engagement, I'm now personally vested. It's my own dollar. Every nickel's mine.
Yep.
And I want to pay the right amount, but I don't want to spend too much. And no matter what research I do, I will always wonder. And there are people out there who all they do is negotiate car buying. They're ex-finance guys. Yeah. And so I called this guy and I said, it's time. It's your moment. And for the whole price, I think it was $550. He did the negotiating. He got me to the table, and all it was a signature. He already knew what he wanted. Yeah. So it was really kind of cool.
Yeah, I think it's fun that this conversation about Schooley Mitchell turns into a conversation on negotiation and sales because most people don't know much about it. I've said from this podcast, I'm a huge fan of Robert Cialdini, right? PhD, I think nominated. I don't know if he won a Nobel Prize, but certainly I think nominated. If I'm not mistaken, Arizona State economics. You know, he wrote the book on marketing, right? He worked undercover in sales, I think, for like a couple of years just to learn everything there was to learn about sales. And then he wrote Influence and Persuasion and some of the really good books. And I know beforehand you referenced the idea of the law of reciprocity. Well, Robert Cialdini came up with the concept of the law of reciprocity. And again, for those of you out there who don't know what we're talking about, the law of reciprocity simply states that when you give somebody something, irrespective of how expensive it is, they feel an emotional need to have to give back. And in most cases, that giving back means by selling. So, Darren was nice enough to tell me his wife doesn't say yes to those, free samples of, expensive French hand lotion or whatever it might be, because she knows that if she gets that, she's going to end up buying a $50 bottle of whatever, right?
And she doesn't need it.
Yeah.
And you remember the old mall, so the people handing them out, and she'd shy away as much as she could, and I'd ask her why, and she's, well, I feel guilty. And yeah, and something so small, and you step back from it, and those are nice things. Someone brings donuts, somebody brings something for Thanksgiving, bottle of wine, all great and very meaningful things, as long as someone knows why they're getting it and what the rationale for it is.
Because it's going to affect your negotiation on goods. Your rep brings you a bunch of donuts. He's a really nice person, possibly, but the law of reciprocity is now put in place, and they know it. And that way, when you go to negotiate, inadvertently, you may not negotiate as hard as you can, and that's where Schooley Mitchell and folks like them certainly will help move the needle. I promised I would tell about the Jefferson Memorial, but I'll let you do it. I don't want to steal your thunder. Just as you went to go take a drink of coffee or water, I'll let you tell, because the concept of negotiating is multifactorial. It has so many pieces that go into it. And I think you explained your wife is a school nurse, and oftentimes, somebody says something and she answers, or, millions of questions down the wrong avenue. And this applies to all negotiations. If you want to tell a story about the Jefferson Memorial, because I think it's a poignant story.
Well, no, I appreciate that. Quick version. So my wife, I do a lot of work in school districts, and my wife would tell me about conversations with parents, and that conversation was simply about she'd start answering. She's very smart, and I told her, and some of these folks, this what came to mind. There's this story about the Jefferson Memorial that was badly deteriorating, so they brought in some consultants, and they brought in a chemist, and they determined that they were using this harsh chemical soap that was mixing with jet fuel. So they brought in a bunch of people to sit down and to talk about moving the airport, which was nearby, until somebody asked a question. Why was the staff excessively washing the monument? And they figured out that they were washing excessive bird droppings. So I'll kind of go through this a little quicker, but they brought in a bird expert. Why were there so many pigeons there? And but they were there to eat spiders. So they brought in and said, why were there so many spiders? Brought in a spider expert. The spider was there to eat midges. And what is a midge? It's just a small little bug that comes out in dusk, frolics, mates, and then dies. So why were there so many bugs? Because the lights that were coming on were attracting them. And so after all this study, what they ended up doing was just turning the lights off 1 hour earlier. And so the lights that attracted the midges attracted the spiders attracted the pigeons pooped all over the monument, and the staff used harsh chemicals that mixed with the jet fuel to create deterioration. And by asking enough questions, they got to the root cause, because the issue wasn't, of course, the chemicals. It was the lights were coming on earlier, attracting midges. And what I like to tell about that story is people want to answer. People feel compelled in many cases to answer questions because in our own way, we're all very smart people. But if you don't ask the question to understand the true root of the why, then you'll never quite address the question at hand. And negotiating is rooted in remember I said earlier, it's transparency and honesty. And so when you can get the accuracy out there, it doesn't mean the answer is yes all the time or you'll get everything, but at least you have factual, opportunity to make good, sound decisions.
Yeah, yeah, it's amazing. And by the way, I'm going to ask you the question you said before about cost in just a moment. But just while we're on concept of negotiation, sales, what have you, for most people out there, your treatment coordinator needs to know this fact. And it just came to my mind talking about all of this because I read it multiple times in multiple books. When your TC presents a fee to a patient, shut up. The next one who talks loses. Remember that, folks. In any negotiation you're in, and the price is discussed by someone to you or by you to somebody, sit there for 3 days if you have to. The first one to talk loses. It's well known in negotiations. And since we're already talking about it, I figure I'd just throw that out there. Do you disagree with that, Darren?
Not at all. There's multiple times when you slide information or we have a service agreement that initiates us, things of that nature. And oftentimes people are just trying to digest. People are thinking through things. And when you start talking, it begins to illustrate, right? Oh, wait, you're anticipating. Remember the kid who got scarred? The anticipation is oh, this is expensive. Oh my gosh, how can we charge so much? And in our model, we have quite frankly, a 50-50 split over a period of time. And it's not just the front end. So we talked a lot about negotiating, but it's also kind of the time frame we operate in. We help support that, so it's a full value proposition. And I won't go into all those details now, but we're really engaging over a period of time. So it's not a one-time effort. It's really an overview where we become assistance and resource support to that organization. But people will ask me things like, "Why would I have you do it?" And it's true. If someone had the time and the energy and the expertise and the people, we've got 100 people in Canada who all they do is talk to vendors all day long.
Wow.
And they don't have another project to go to. That's it. That's the answer they need to get. So a lot of it has to do with, and no different than when you do tell a client, here's the price. I will talk about profitability. There are two areas of profitability, right? Number one is price. And the fastest way to increase profitability in any business, assuming no change, is price integrity. That's strategic.
Right.
One penny higher, 92 cents of it goes to the bottom line. That depends on contribution margin, but fundamentally where I came from. And the second area, which we operate in, is the same spend with no change, spend reduction. Assuming we're not letting people go, you're not, it's changing anything. Those are the two areas. Price is important, and price is about value, right? And what you offer is value.
So let's in the last couple of minutes we've got, let's hit the price part of it. What does it cost? First of all, for everybody out there, Darren does not want you just to sign up. What happens is there's a discovery call. They go through it with you. They find out really where they can save money. Is it a good fit? Can they really save you what you need to, et cetera, et cetera? That's a given. And he'll tell you how to sign up and talk to him about that afterwards. But cost-wise, what should people expect to spend on this? And how are you compensated?
Great question. So we're a performance-based business or contingent, which simply means that if we find and identify savings and they are implemented, that's kind of important because the practice has to realize those benefits. We share those savings 50% over a period of time. If there are no savings, then we will validate professionally with a report that you are optimized. Or let's say that we have a recommendation to move from vendor A to vendor B. However, somebody does not want to do that. Fair enough. There's no fees. So if there's no savings or a recommendation is not accepted, it is black and white. And we continue to support folks. But that's true. So when we're talking about signing up, the first conversation is about fit, right, for both of us, because our projects they do really well when we're kind of married, when we are both vested in success. And if that doesn't seem to be the case or the timing's not right, that's okay too. There's always a moment because businesses are living, right? Things change, things grow, things shrink. There's all kinds of reasons. Just look at COVID. So there's a variety of external and internal influences that change when the time may be right.
Right on. So if someone wants to get a hold of you, how do they do it?
Appreciate you asking. They're welcome to call me at 816-559-7789. They can send me an email at Darren, my first name, Darren, .Morris,
And
at
that's
Schooley,
Morris.
that's right, at SchooleyMitchell.com, school, EY, and then the name Mitchell, MITCHELL.com. They can also find me at www.schooleymitchell.com/DMorris. And of course on LinkedIn, Darren Morris. I publish and write a lot of things on there, so certainly can see some information about us.
I just want to say, Darren, thank you for being here today. I think I know we talked about a lot of things other than Schooley Mitchell, but at the end of the
That's okay.
day, if you put together good negotiating tactics and you have economies of scale, the ability to hold the line, so to speak, there's a whole bunch of reasons why that go into it. You ultimately can negotiate significantly better rates and fees and costs than what you currently have. And we touched on two relatively mundane concepts. We talked about braces and paper towels, but that's not really what this is all about. There's so much more to it. Meet with him, talk to him, see what he can save you and where he can save you. Because again, at the end of the day, if you can save money for vacations or staff or anything, technology that you can, apply in your life, I mean, it's money and you're not changing anything. Why would you not do this? And so, Darren, thank you so much for being here. Looking forward to spending more time with you and learning more from you, and just have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much. Wonderful to be here.